I love that you get back to the core of like we're solving problems for the user. That's great. I feel like today's world, people are building so fast, they might lose the original, the original goal for who we are as a product builder. One thing I wanted to ask you is like, looking back in the last year, what is the hardest thing you have to unlearn? Because it feels like the job description as a product builder is changing every single week now.
I think as a product leader, I always say you have to have kind of a portfolio approach and kind of like this, the three horizons approach and how you allocate towards that thing. Because I think you should be allocating towards the iterative development as kind of the core things of, delivering on what you already promised to users, but you need to be thinking down to the next horizon and beyond.
One thing I wanted to ask you is like, looking back in the last year, what is the hardest thing you have to unlearn? Because it feels like the job description as a product builder is changing every single week now. Welcome to UX Stories. I'm your host, Lee Hong Hicken. I've spent my career obsessed about how we understand what users actually think. When Chris and I helped scale usertesting.com from zero to IPO, we thought we nailed it. We figured it out. But AI has changed everything. The speed of building is now 10 times faster than the speed of listening. So Chris and I built FaceAd. We want to use the vibe testing to match the speed of vibe coding. So I'm here to talk to builders who want to ship products users love. Today, I'm joined by Sam Ho, ex-head of product at Tuning, VP of product at Sendoso, and director of product at Glassdoor. Also with an incredible foundation at Google and Intel. All right, Sam, I know you have a glory of a resume, but deep down, me and my listener want to know, who are you as a product builder?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on and asking such a great question. Yeah, I think as a product leader, it's really about solving user problems. And I think that's the same as for like engineers. We're always there to kind of, given a problem, how do we solve that? I think the unique aspect that I bring there as a product leader is really that kind of multifaceted experience across go-to-market teams, including sales, marketing, engineering, and product, to really always represent the user who's not in the room and understand that different perspective. And so how do we take those different insights? And it's always around starting with the problem and really understanding the problem so that we can really build the right solution.
That's great. I love that you get back to the core of like, we're solving problems for the user. That's great. I feel like today's world, people are building so fast, they might lose the original goal for who we are as a product builder. One thing I wanted to ask you is like, looking back in the last year, what is the hardest thing you have to unlearn? Because it feels like the job description as a product builder is changing every single week now.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know about the unlearning, but it's like, how are you learning how you can use these tools and how the entire process is changing? I think, talking to different companies, they're like, what is your process? I'm like, well, this is the process we used to do, which is a little bit, more agile. We do this iterative thing. We build kind of lo-fi designs, then we go to kind of medium, then we build a prototype, we get feedback, and then we iterate on that. And then we like start actually building it in engineering. I think that whole entire thing has been upended and that cycle has changed where, and we were always trying to protect engineering time because that used to be the largest constraint, even to get to a prototype. That's why we do low fidelity, high fidelity, and do these things. And then the other aspect is now we can go to a prototype right away. And we should do that. Like you can have an idea. And then I think the key aspect there is to bring it to users right away and get their feedback on that. Ideally, of course, you've already talked to users and that's where you've already identified there's a problem and you're solving that problem with this prototype. Then you bring that prototype to validate that your solution actually solves the problem that they have.
That's an interesting point you bring out. Like, I never thought about this. Like when we are building it, the key principle I always think is like protect engineering time, right? It's like, but these days with vibe coding, you can build something over the afternoon. Like we really got to rethink this. Like, do we still need to protect engineering time? Like, is that something I feel like we had to, that got me thinking like the rise of vibe coding, right? We build things so fast. Do you feel like the speed of building make you feel like free to innovate? Or does it make you feel like you're just running faster on a treadmill that's going nowhere?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I feel like in some cases, because you can just build and launch things, and it's true for engineering too, then the velocity is so fast and it's so easy to launch things. But I think that might be the wrong solution. Because then what you end up is like a tool that's very powerful, but it's really hard to
Mhm.
use. And so you have to really think about that user experience. And I do have to think about that. Do I want to slow things down in order to think through this, do the proper usability testing to make sure it's actually going to work for customers and they're actually going to adopt it? I think the measurements are there, right? You'll see these features and I'm like, well, how many people adopted? They're like, 4% of our users even touch this. And I said, well, then did you actually bring the value? You have the power, but that's not alone what has to happen. You have to think about making sure it's usable and designed in a way that makes sense. And that's where taste comes in to make those decisions and think through the user experience at all levels, right? A lot of people design for themselves as a power
Yes.
user, and you need to think outside of that. And I always say that for user research too, right? If you only, of course, the people who are most likely to talk to you are your power users who want some next advanced feature, and that's what you want to
Yeah.
build. But you also need to think about that user who's just onboarding. What's their experience? Like, how are they going to level up, right? To that. I was just having this conversation with the sales leader about, do you meet them where they are, or how do you try to level them up to that place? And I say, actually, you do meet them where they are. Just like in games, right? We don't start them at level 100, start them at level 0, and we keep them, letting them build up the skills and level up and take them through that journey that gets them to where they want to be and where you want them to be.
That's what's I like that you have mind for all different type of users, because oftentimes we lost our thoughts because the kids that cry loudest, right? The users who's loudest, most vocal, gets the feature built, because you sometimes have a bias because like you talk to them all the time and then you just build features for them, but maybe they're only 4% of your entire user base. And that's something to be careful about, right? Because sometimes we can't help it. We're human being. We just talk to the feedback that's easiest to get, which is the people we can get to and people who are giving you the feedback. That's interesting. How do you make sure you talk to the silent user who really need a good product, who you really need to get the feedback because they are silent, they don't talk to you, but you need to build for them? That's hard. How do you get them to provide feedback so that you can build a product for them?
Yeah, I think that's where I think it's going to be super interesting with how you can scale user research and like customer discovery. Because it's not also just about those early users. It's also you're running a business and it's about won and lost deals. I need to talk to those people we didn't convert because the product didn't land for them. So, I need to think about all those aspects, right? Not just like the new users and the power users, but people who were never
Yeah,
users and that they saw a demo and they didn't feel like it met their
yeah.
needs. And I think the way to do that, right, is like, you're also limited by how many interviews you can do. I think with AI, you can really scale that a lot more effectively and using different things and using some of the things, right, that you used the honorariums to kind of do
Well,
that, but
if you know
to scale that
you need an
and
AI interview tool can help you interview
yeah,
hundreds of thousands of people at scale for free.
yeah, I think you can do that. And then the other things that I'm seeing, right, is, we're getting used to recording and
Right.
transcriptions. And, I've recently been working with this company, Ask Elephant, and they record all the meetings and they're able to basically synthesize all the product insights happening in those prospect meetings, in those customer meetings. And they automatically create these tickets in the user story format that they've extracted from those conversations. And you can go back to that conversation and see what they actually said. Now, how do they then then you're going to have to use AI to again rank it because you probably can't read the thousands of pieces that are going
Yeah.
through there. But how do you go and do that and leverage that insight as well? Because these people are talking to users and potential customers all the
Yes.
time. And there's a lot of great feedback
But
embedded
I
in
would
there.
argue that you only get the feedback of the buyers, not the actual users who are not talking to your sales.
That's a very good point as well.
Okay, using your weapon to attack you. That's interesting. All right, we're in this the user experience. Well, what's some of the popular belief in user experience the product that you think is popular but is completely wrong?
I think like an easy one that I think about, and I used to think about this all the time, right? Is I'm trying to solve user pain and anything that's like, everything's just got to be like faster,
Uh,
right? But really to frame it differently, it's not always, sometimes you want to ask them a question because you don't want to do something
mm,
wrong. And so it's really about reducing, cognitive load. And so thinking about it slightly different, that I'm trying to make their decisions easier. And sometimes I don't want to like make it faster where they've automated that decision and they didn't like the outcome. And that's where you might actually introduce some friction. Hey, do you really want this meeting to be public? Right? Or do you want this to be private? Right? Or actually, maybe I want you to share it because it's like useful knowledge for everyone else, but by default it's private. So maybe I ask you, do you want to share this and introduce some friction because it's going to lead to better value for the organization. So don't think about just reducing friction, but like, how do you reduce cognitive load to achieve, your longer term outcomes?
Interesting. I see that there's a huge difference between you and other product builders I interview. You are real go-to-market executive that has like, marketing, sales background, as well as product background in this. That's why you kind of think slightly different to other product builders in mind. So very fascinating perspective. So now I want to pick your mind on the famous Henry Ford paradox. So you probably heard about this. If I ask my users what they want, and they will say, I want a faster horse. So there's two type of product builders here. One is this visionary builders who think user feedback is noise, right? If you ask them, what do you want? I want a faster horse, right? Henry Ford asked them. So this visionary product leaders knows better than the users. They can actually build better product than the user know themselves. They can build it better. So it's just like Steve Jobs is that kind of person. Or the other type of product builders who build alongside with their customers, like test along the way, test the prototype, test the right product, test along the way, and more agile alongside the way. Which type of product builder are you?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I think as a product leader, I always say you have to have kind of a portfolio approach and kind of like this, the three horizons approach and how you allocate towards that thing. Because I think you should be allocating towards the iterative development. That's kind of the core things of, delivering on what you already promised to users. But you need to be thinking down to the next horizon and beyond. And that's where you have to have a long-term vision. And it's about the sequence, how you get there. And you can build iteratively towards that, but you might need to make some step function jumps that require a little bit of a leap. I think it also depends on the type of business you are, honestly, right? If you're a startup, you just got to have some ideas and you got to find product market fit. You're going to try a lot of, crazy things. And sometimes you just got to have a crazy vision and believe in it and go for it. Then like you're going into the scale mode and it's probably like getting more to like, hey, just build these things that like you already promised and keep doing that and keep doing that well. And then you get to like the mature companies and it's going to be very much like metrics driven. If I just like move this one pixel here for Google, that's worth $50 million. And so you're going to do those things because you have a lot of downside risk
Yeah.
if
So
you
you
miss.
think,
And that's the kind of
so you're
innovator's
thinking the
dilemma.
big vision pie, big picture pie, you need a visionary leader. And on the small feature incremental change, you listen to the user feedback. Is that what you are thinking?
Yeah. And I think, you always have to keep digging down further, right? The 5 whys and get to kind of the core job to be done. And there may be a way they're doing it now and you might like, meet them where they are and how they do that. But you might think maybe there's a completely different way to do this if they weren't constrained by their current situation. And can you look at the whole system of these problems? And there might be a completely different
Yeah.
way, right? I'll give you a lot of examples in process is like one person's doing this, one person doing this. And okay, I look at this field and do this and you can make that part better. And then it goes to the next step, but you could actually have removed that. Maybe it's not even needed in this process anymore. It's just that people are doing that. So you don't want to be just doing these micro optimizations. You have to understand, like, is there a larger optimization at play for kind of a global maximum versus a local?
I actually personally, and I talk this topic with a lot of product builders. They really don't believe there's a true visionary leader that built in a vacuum. I mean, even Steve Jobs, Apple has some of the largest design lab where they got, they have a dedicated design lab where they get a feedback and to build their product. So like it's a marketing scheme that they have this visionary leader, right, to build this. But I personally believe like you got to listen to the feedback of your users, but you're going to listen to their pain and their problem, but you don't listen to their solution. It's like they may say, I need a red button. Like you listen to what problem, what pain point you have, but the solution come from the product builder. So that's
Yeah, definitely. Seen that happen a lot where you just add that widget, you add these 5 different widgets that are actually solving the same underlying problem, but you built it in 5 different ways. because that's what the customer, five different customers
Well,
asked
I
for.
think today, in the past we sit here and debate this, but today, and I feel like with the AI vibe coding and stuff, this it's so tempted. Like, vibe coding, you can build a lot of things, and it's so tempted. Just like, I don't know if you saw the news. So, user testing got acquired by private equity, and then same private equity bought User Zone, what users do, and then 2 weeks ago they bought User Interview. So all the major player in the usability space has been bought by private equity firm. So I remember 13 years ago when we started usertesting.com, you can get $19.99 per test. If you have an idea, if you have a prototype, you get feedback quickly. The same day you test it. So that was amazing. But now everything is under enterprise contract. So if you are a startup today, the cost of curiosity is unaffordable. How are you getting feedback? So if I'm a funder today, I can't get testing. So I can get fake testing from a synthetic panelist, but they're not real users. It's an AI persona. So I'm just like, screw it. I'm not testing. I'm just build it and guess it. And if I guess it wrong, I rip it apart and build it again. So do you sacrifice feedback, or do you wait? Do you find a third solution in today's world is tough? Like, what do you do now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I do think like, again, it goes back to like the constraints, and now that has changed. And I think showing people is always better than telling them. And so, you have to be careful about leading the witness. But I do think like, yeah, you can just launch these things and put it in your customers' hands and get their feedback and then talk to them, because like the cost of launching can be pretty low, and you can limit it, right? You can have your design partners and your alpha testers and do that, but the cost is low. And sometimes especially when you're getting to the solution, hopefully you already have some idea of the original problem, right? And it's really about more on iterating on the solutions, because otherwise you're just solving something that they don't have a problem of. That's not. But in terms of like, do I need to do detailed like mock up, like, and like do detailed interviews? I think sometimes you could just try it and they'd be like, yeah, this is amazing, or it's not.
But yeah, again, it's just like I feel like people are talking about all these the bubbles in AI, and I think today, I'm not talking about young people. I feel like today people are building more shitty products, and there are a lot more product out there. It's because today people are shipping less quality product, and the product not like, sometimes the product is the UI UX look good. They just don't make any sense. What problem are you trying to solve for who again? Like, I don't get it. You go look at product hunt. There's so many product hunting every day. I was like, sorry, I don't get it. What problem are you trying to solve today? Who are you solving it for? I think the industry is sick. It's because people are losing the vision. It is like the cost of shipping is so low. Let's just ship it, and then we'll just figure it out. And that I think is because the cost of validating ideas is because it's unaffordable. So, and that's why Chris and I bring out the third options. Like, let's bring back the $19.99 test again back. Let's get it tested and build a great solid product again, right? Rather than say, let's don't get it tested and all that. But anyway, all right. So let's go into some rapid firing questions before we wrap it out. Okay, so Sang, I know you are a free bird now and doing some independent project. Maybe I'm wrong. What are some of the interesting projects you are working on building now?
Yeah, I think on my own, I've just been really like trying to go back to builder mode. And so this really meant, hey, if product design engineering is all collapsing into this kind of builder persona, what does that mean for us? Right. And what are the skills you're going to need in the future? And that meant also to really get back into using, Claude Code. We're not back into it, but hey, learn how to use these tools, Cursor, Claude Code, and build your own agents. And what can you do? I think what's like super interesting there is, I used to be an engineer. I used to write code. And I like to use the Vim editor. It's a very esoteric, hard to use editor, to be honest. But actually what I find is I'm just using mainly voice input to Claude Code, and Claude Code is basically my pair everything.
That's tough.
It's pair programming, but actually a lot of things I'm doing are just writing docs right? And I'm going to do a competitive analysis for this. It's just, I need to create a doc on that. And I just like work with Clone Code and iterate and give feedback, ask questions, brainstorm these things, ask them to go in different directions and just keep unraveling threads and doing that and using that as voice. So they're just basically a voice partner that you're kind of
That's
sparring
awesome.
back and forth with.
And for other entrepreneurs or for yourself, just all kind. That's really fun.
Yeah. And so I've used this, basically to teach other PMs, like they can build their own PM Copilot system that will do this. And I've used this and shown this to different companies and changed kind of how they work, where, hey, actually, product managers, you should
Coding.
be in Cursor. And so some of the startups I work with, like they completely changed how they do that, right? And that even goes further beyond prototyping and Replit. It's actually, hey, you're going to go and, make your own changes and vibe code that both for designers and product managers. And you're going to submit a PR, and then engineers are going to review those PRs and accept them. I think that's the new future we're going to. And that's what you see at AI native startups, where they can do that. And they have other agents that do the initial reviews to make it a little cleaner and
That's
speed
great.
that up.
What's your toolkit in terms of getting feedback, in terms of like usability testing? How do you get feedback, when you are building these projects and products?
I think in terms of getting different feedback, it's still probably doing a lot of, for me, it's not so much it's like doing things that don't scale, which means I just talk to users directly. Right. And I talk to different people I know, people who reach out to me, and I say, hey, let me show you this and let me, get your feedback on this. And I just talk to them about the general problem, kind of doing kind of more customer discovery reviews.
If you had a magical wand, what's one thing that would make getting user feedback dramatically easier?
Yeah. If I had a magical wand, of course, it would just automatically do that very cheaply and at the detail that I want with, thousands of different people, right? And finding these, potential different users. And so, of course, it's to do that. I think the synthesizing part is relatively straightforward. We're doing that using ChatGPT, Claude, et cetera. So we can synthesize a lot of that. But being able to go and do that, at least that's probably, on the user research front, I would expect to be able to use that type of tool.
Cool. You are describing us. We can, if you're interested, I will show you like doing that. The thing, because when you're doing the interviews, you still have to physically manually show up into those interview calls. If you can do it without showing up, but as if you're on calls, that will be game changer. Or like this user test be pop up inside your product. So that would be ideal. Cool. Last question as a wrap up. What is the most fulfilling part of leading product and engineering?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the original thing is that we're trying to solve problems, right? And it's really just like, you brainstorming and coming up with solutions that have a big impact and you've solved that problem. So really driving that outcome and like being able to go, and it's kind of like playing with Legos, right? And you're kind of going and building something and seeing that have like, a huge impact is what's, most rewarding, and just coming up, brainstorming about a lot of different things, right? With engineering on like how you might solve this problem. What are the constraints? What's happening here? Is storage an issue? Is it like just the complexity? Is it just the latency that's happening, right? We're discussing all these things. Let's discuss the user trade-offs here. Are there different ways to go through this? And then just getting different perspectives, right? That always make you think, right? And like, and that's always what I found with the user research is like, sometimes they're using your product in ways you didn't think about. And you might make your assumptions, but a lot of times they're very wrong. And so it's always interesting to think how and understand how people are doing things differently.
Totally. That's great. Awesome. All right. That concludes our interview. Very interesting, insightful conversation, Sam.